Hello and welcome to Authentic Moments, a podcast that gives you ideas and strategies for personal growth in the practice of parenting. Yes, parenting is a practice. I am Anna Seewald, a parent educator who is passionate about personal development, living simply and authentically. And yes, this year I am putting an emphasis on living simply, simplifying my day, my life, my relationships, and enjoying people and my life more. And I am passionate about parenting from the heart. With background in psychology and education, working with children for nearly 18 years, today I have the privilege of working with parents worldwide. I enjoy helping parents. If you're a new listener, welcome and thank you so much for tuning in. This is a show where we talk about the importance of gaining deeper self-knowledge, learning who we are, elevating our consciousness, cultivating mindfulness, getting closer to our true authentic self in order to support our children in that very same process of self-discovery. As I always say, parenting is a parallel growth process. We grow and evolve, and our children grow and evolve, and I am fascinated by that process. You can learn more on my website, authenticparenting.com. Today's guest has been on a podcast before. She's one of my awesome listeners, a lovely, passionate, talented lady from the Netherlands who currently lives in the state of Florida. She's a mom of 3 kids, grown kids, adults, and she has a very interesting story. Carla von Walsum, she grew up in the Netherlands in the 50s with a severely autistic sister. At that time, people didn't know much about autism, and Carla's story, it touched my heart so deeply. After we recorded this episode, Carla posted something on Facebook, and I would like to read that to you because it just summarizes how she felt about the interview and what this interview is about. This is what she wrote. My autistic sister. The ones who know me know that I love to talk and to listen. And what a wonderful experience is it if someone interviews you and asks questions that you do not expect, and altogether you discover aspects of your life that are cause and effect and effortlessly blending together. I shared about my childhood where I was together with my severely autistic sister who never spoke a word. She was 18 months older. I developed a lot of compassion for her due to the label my parents gave me to say and think, quote unquote, I have an unhappy sister. The consequences of that concept were huge. The guilt of being quote unquote normal. And then my life's work theme became helping people to be more happy in life. I just had the honor and fantastic experience to be interviewed for the podcast of Anna Seewald, Authentic Parenting. She's not only very interesting and knowledgeable, but has a huge heart. She even cried about what I shared. End of her post. And it's true, I did tear up a few times. Yes, I am a very emotional person, and I cried a few times on the podcast before. It is not new, but when she shared a few of her memories, so I could see it in my head so vividly, and my heart just pained for those people, for her parents, for her sister, for Carla. It's just a very heartfelt story. And Carla is a very talented person. Her parents pushed and pressured her to become a classical flutist, and she did. But she discovered that that wasn't her career. She didn't want to have that as a career. It wasn't true to herself. So what did she do? She chose a completely different career path. Carla von Walsum was trained in the Netherlands in clinical psychology, holistic therapies, and family constellations, and owns Heart-Based Solutions, a thriving holistic practice for individuals, parents, and families. For over 20 years, Carla has been an internationally recognized teacher, therapist, and facilitator in the areas of relationships, heart-based parenting, women empowerment, transgenerational trauma, and emotional healing. I will have more about Carla in the show notes page. And of course, I will have links to her website, to her social media, and feel free to connect with her, say hello to her on social media. And I will include a link to a beautiful musical piece Carla plays on the flute. She is a talented, passionate woman, and she truly wants to make a difference in the world. She's very enthusiastic about education, relationships, children, parenting, and families. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And if you're listening to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, I would really appreciate if you could rate and write a brief review. In fact, currently I am running a contest. I announced about that contest on social media, on Instagram and Facebook, and I even posted a picture of a beautiful mug with the logo of the podcast, and I know many of you love that picture, so I am going to choose one lucky winner and send that beautiful mug with a handwritten note. So please, let's get to the 100 reviews. I would really appreciate that. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while and you really like the show, take a few moments and rate and review on Apple Podcasts. Of course, you can leave a review wherever you listen to the podcast too, but the helpful one is the Apple Podcasts, the iTunes review. I can't wait to get your reviews. Thank you so much in advance. And now, please enjoy this interview with Carla von Walsum. Carla, welcome to Authentic Moments. I am so excited to have you on the show as a guest this time.
Thank you so much, Anna. And I think the pleasure is more mine because it's such an honor to be invited by you because I love your program with all the different kinds of speakers and your lovely messages.
Thank you. I hope our listeners remember that you were one of the audience members in our 100th episode. And thanks for participating. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting. And I want to dive into your personal story today and share it with my listeners. You have quite an interesting life journey. You came all the way. You were born in the Netherlands. Now you live in Florida. But that's not the most important or interesting part, right? So let's go a little even back to your childhood. Tell me where you grew up. What kind of girl was Carla? What were your interests? And tell us a little bit about your upbringing.
What a nice questions. Let me go there. Yes, I'm the second child in a family. The firstborn child, my mother was 20 when she got her. And she was really autistic, didn't speak a word. And I grew up together with her and I got over time 2 more brothers who fortunately do speak. So that's different. I came from that kind of family that was burdened by the Second World War and really tried to build up again and, all the getting over the wounds and creating a new life. And then my mother was 20 when she got my sister and I came 1.5 years later. So I grew up with her and it is interesting that I started to skip grades, probably for getting attention, because, that if there's a handicapped child and a non-handicapped child, that is hard for parents to probably when they're themselves very occupied with their own stuff. So for me, it was like a kind of getting attention.
You said you had an autistic sister. And if you're willing or open to speak a little bit, I may ask a few questions. Are you open?
Absolutely.
So this was your mother's first child. And then 1.5 years later, you came into the world. Mm-hmm. Did you see a difference to the way your parents treated both of you?
Of course, very much so, because it is difficult for parents to have a handicapped child to begin with. But my sister was also the first 3 years of her life crying nonstop. And I was born in the middle of that. And I, as young as I was, I always have said, if I ever get children, that child will never cry. So I think it was very much how that got actually in my system already. And yes, that makes it very different. My parents did a wonderful thing, though, was telling me that I had a sister that was unhappy. So the word handicap or disorder wasn't there, but that by saying I have an unhappy sister created in me a sense of compassion, even though she ruined my dolls always, and she ruined my toys, and she was, we were always together, but it was of course not an equal relationship, equal in a way as people, but not, she didn't talk. So that was a huge difference. But that my parents have said that you have an unhappy sister and all the attention went to her, for sure. For sure. That's what I was just saying before. In skipping grades in school and focusing so much in learning was a way for me to get finally attention. And in the same way what I mentioned about the criticism or the raising children, the assumptions and the judgments, all that gave me a wonderful opportunity to be aware how that can change. And what I found in nonviolent communication, as I mentioned. But my sister, of course, had other sides in my upbringing, because you feel guilty when you are quote unquote normal and considered normal. And yes, I was not allowed to be angry ever, and I was not allowed to complain ever. Now, I have a quite upbeat personality, so that helps. But life is not always fun, and you sometimes want to be angry. But the fact that I learned so much compassion and was able to step into her footprints, that pre-paved certainly the way for doing the work I do today, and as a holistic psychotherapist or psychologist, actually. So that helped, of course. And I became very aware at a certain point about self-compassion, because it's beautiful to have compassion and give, which is anyway instilled in children. Like if you give, you're fantastic, but nobody says, "Oh, that's so fantastic that you receive." No, you're only getting a great support when you give, and so. The same with compassion. If you're compassionate, you're there for the other, but you need also to have compassion for yourself, and your boundaries should be respected too.
Give me a memory of your childhood when we speak like this, a memory of you and your sister. It could be any memory.
Well, what pops up is that she was in several different homes. My parents were always very much trying to find help for her. Autism wasn't known then, so of course my mother got the blame. So where do you go? How do you go? So our weekends were filled with traveling to my sister if she wasn't living at home. That was for a couple of years. And then she came back living home because she was so unhappy in those places, although they were very nice. But she was just unhappy, permanently unhappy. So that made me wanting to make her more happy, right? But one of the memories that pops up too was if I did normal things like going to a party when I was 15 and she saw me putting up makeup. She also put on makeup on herself, and she had also weak motoric skills. She was pretty damaged during birth as well. So then I saw the makeup, the rouge was somewhere in her eyebrows and the eyeshadow was somewhere in her cheeks. And that's heartbreaking. You don't go to a party and leave your sister there. So I was like, okay, I take her. So I went actually everywhere where I could take her. I took her. And now I look back and I thought, oh, that's actually pretty nice. I did that. But on the other hand, it's so normal. It gives a burden for if you are having a sister like that guilt, that feelings of guilt in a way that you don't have her problem. And it takes away certainly, like I said, I was never allowed to be angry or to complain, or very silly things that we meet people and they felt sorry for her. And then she got a candy and I didn't. And I had once actually, the audacity to ask, may I please get a candy too? And then the answer was, are you jealous of your sister? So Yeah, it's that is also a non-compassionate question. So it has given me tremendous much insight in this way of looking at people, of course, about how people function and how limited can be if we are not able to step into the footprints of the other person that we are communicating with.
And how long, you said you were 15 when you were taking her to parties and not excluding her and wanting her to be part of your life as well. When did that stop? I'm assuming there was a point where, and I'm curious, when was that detachment that happened for you?
I think there was never a detachment because there's an ongoing loyalty and a deep loyalty, of course, too. And when I was an adult and left home and studied and had my own apartment, she came in the weekends, not specifically longer weekends, to relieve my parents a little bit because they saw her practically every weekend. The only thing what happened when that it was the only disconnect, and that was a painful one, when I was moving to Florida. And I was like, the problem for her, with her, because, but yeah, I can talk a little bit more about that. But one of the things that that we know for sure with her was that she had a very negative self-image, that she walked around in a way like, I'm not lovable. I have received that information through different channels. So by going away to America, that means that I leave her, so she would feel excluded and she would feel abandoned, and that was painful. And what I remember, something that's also very funny, that because probably of those feelings of guilt, and I was never aware of that, I always gave her something. I bought her something, I gave her something, I always gave her a little gift. And Anna, I did not know that consciously, I just did that. And when I had myself little babies, I was so preoccupied with that because my kids had a tendency of barely sleeping, at least the first two. So I remember I was visiting my parents one day, and I had three, so they were babies, they were young. And I didn't have something for her. And what did she do? She was there. She put her hand in front of her eyes and turned her face, and she didn't want to look at me. And I thought, what's that? Because she was very fond of me. She was very, we grew up together. So she was very attached to me, even though she wasn't living home and I wasn't living home. That bond was there. And I was wondering, why does she look at me? And then my father said, but do you realize you always give her something? So you see, I hadn't given her something. I said first, no, that's not true. I'm not always giving her something. He said, yes, I think you do. And I was like, okay. So I went to my wallet. I took out some money because she liked that too, or liked. And I gave her money, and then the hand was away. So she looked at me. So what happens, you can see how simple that is and how sad. She took everything in a negative way. So if I didn't give her a gift, that was for her rejection. And that's why she didn't want to look at me, because that was painful, or that was her way of punishing. She could also hit me by showing her anger, but she did too, of course. No, not of course, but that could happen.
Do you have a sense or a feeling, like looking back now, do you have a sense that you somehow compensated for your parents, the way you treated her or the way you were with your sister?
I'm not sure that I compensated for my parents. I am sure that I had to be the perfect daughter, which I, of course, was not. That was more a compensation for my parents. That was one thing, yeah. And what I can see, and maybe that's a good thing to mention for other parents if they listen, and if you have a child with disabilities, it is heartbreaking if you have an unhappy child, really, when your child or special needs in a severe way. And then, yeah, you forget that the other child or other children need also attention and love and care. And you need to be really aware of that, because automatically you go to protect more that child that has issues. And my parents said that out loud. They said that out loud. I was 7, I got tuberculosis. And then the school doctor said, she probably need to be away a little bit from the pressure for sister. And that was totally denied by my parents, because no, there was no pressure. Of course, there was a lot of pressure, because It was very difficult with her. It was a lot of pain. And what I admire in my parents, that they opened any door. They went to a certain point to medical intuitives, to clairvoyant people, only to know why is she crying? Is she having pain? What's going on with her? Because, and she got also hearing aids because they thought she was deaf, and she broke that. So she was not deaf. She was had decided on a deep level in her, on a soul level, we don't know, that she decided not to talk. It was like a self-inflicted punishment or so. I don't know. Very difficult, very difficult.
Did she ever improve or speak? How has her life unfolded after that?
She has spoken one time a few words as a little kid. That's what they said in the school when she was in the school for kids that were like with hearing issues and speaking issues. But then she was treated more as an autistic child. It became we are born in the late 50s. So that's a while ago. So then she went into the Waldorf system therapeutical centers. This was wonderful because there was a lot of art and love and care and music. And anyway, so that's how she lived the rest years of her life. And she also went to live in an assisted living facility where they took day and night care of her. And she passed away from uterus cancer in 2011.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Well, that is another thing. I was not too sorry, not because of whatever reason. Her life was suffering, and that is painful. It's painful if you see somebody suffering that you cannot reach. And what I would like to share something, because that's very powerful. At a certain moment, I came across the idea that because her way of feeling so unhappy and not loved, and she was loved very much, but she couldn't take it in. She couldn't touch people. She was never warm. She was very standoffish. She showed no emotions, but she showed only emotions from her perceived, right? And at a certain moment, she was so depressed, and I was already in America, and my mother was telling about that. And I said, why won't you put on the walls everywhere? And you say it to her all the time. My parents never could say, I love you. That's something that was not in their vocabulary, and they wouldn't say it. And I said to my mother, I know you're challenged now to say what is hard for you to say, but you need to say it in order to help her to give these words in, the written words, even if she could read it or no, I don't know. But even the written word have energy. So I asked my mother to do that and to tell her and to tell the teachers or the people that care for her, to tell her every time, we love you, you're great, you're so sweet, all these beautiful words. And in a few days, Anna, she was totally different. She was much better and much less depressed. So how helpful is that? Even with somebody that's not communicating with listening, the energy comes in and touched her. And that was very touching. I find that a very beautiful example.
Oh, I'm crying because this is so touchy. So your mom had a hard time saying I love you to her?
To her, not. Then at that moment, to us as kids, but not to the kids that listened. But I have never heard it. But to my sister, she was forced in a way to overcome her resistance to speak like that. And so she did that, and that helped my sister a lot. And my parents for sure loved us in their way, but to say that is another thing. And then I'm in America, and that word love is said so much. And I love that. I think it's wonderful. I know so much about the power of words and the energy of words that there's no better word to use as much as you can.
Anything you wish you had done or said to your sister now that, she's not alive and you moved on, looking back as a child even, or a teenager or young adult?
No, actually, I can live with this feeling that I've been a very nice sister. I've done a lot for her, and you can never do enough anyway, you know that. It's never good enough, it's never enough. But I know that I've done so much, so I do not feel guilty. But what I realized later when I started to do the constellation work, and I know that a sentence or a word or a concept can touch you and then connect you to a trauma you carry, right? And when I then heard that you could be inhibited in life by inhibited by success, by being successful, because you have these feelings of loyalty or hidden loyalty or self-sabotage almost because of a hidden loyalty that you carry. Well, when they gave it as an example, like when I heard it like 15 years ago, when I started to learn the family constellation work, when I heard then as an example, if you have a sibling that is handicapped, the loyalty to that sibling can keep you from thriving. And that hit me right away and made me very emotional. And then I realized, that's another thing that you have, like, that you could have it with your mother, you could have it with your father, but acknowledge it. So, but that was very deep, and I was successful still, but I pushed it away too, I was successful as a classical flautist, but I didn't care about it. I was poo-pooing it even. So there are things, to be in alignment with success, that is maybe a little bit more easier in the United States than it is in the Netherlands. That's a different culture. The word success is not so super popular. Mm-hmm. And that's, I don't know how you relate to that.
Yeah, I relate to that too. Yes. Mm-hmm. So, how did you go into becoming a classical flutist? Talk to me about that. Did your parents value music education, or tell me a little bit about that? I know you don't play the flute, you play for pleasure, but you have a completely different career path. Mm-hmm. But how did you get into music in the first place?
Well, as part of our education, because in my family, they were very oriented to and interested in art and music, specifically classical music, yes, and history and all that, right? So then it's part of your education to learn an instrument. And I wanted to play. I was then in the Waldorf school already, and there was a big festivity, summer fest in the woods, and there was somebody playing a trumpet, and I was like, yes, that's what I want. So I came home, and they asked me a certain day, what do you want to play? And we had a big piano in the house. My father played every day. He was very advanced, and Schubert, Bach, Beethoven, all those composers. He was very well doing that. So I said, I want to play trumpet. And my father said, well, that's not an instrument for a girl. So he told it out of my head. And then at a certain moment, they put a flute under my nose. Really like that. And I'm like, okay, let me do that. That's how I started. If it would have been a real heartfelt choice that I would have tried every instrument before making a choice, I probably would have chosen violin or piano. But the flute was there, and I seem to have had talent for it. But you know what? Everybody has talents, and you have often more than one talent. And I wanted to study psychology, and my father said, no, you're too sensitive for that. I won't pay. So there was no other way to do it. Holland doesn't have a system like you have in America, that you can get scholarships in a way if you're good in school. That didn't exist. Doesn't exist still, I think. There are different things. So, they talked me into, okay, you go become a musician. That was actually the way I was directed to. And almost obligate. Well, I had also something, and you have that too, Anna, because I heard your piano playing, and you have something that touches the soul. And I seem to have had that too, or have that with the flute. And when I played, people were like, wow, they were crying, or they had an emotional response. So, okay. And there were people saying, go to do with art something, because I was good in creative things as well. Okay. So I became, and the funny thing was, it was like, I'm not sure I want this, but let the universe decide. And I was 18. I had just studied the whole summer Jung. I was reading every book from Carl Jung that I could. And then I did audition for the music academy. And there were like 10 students or applicants, and I was the only one chosen. So, well, I don't know. But, I started. And then, I got a great career. But I wasn't happy with it because my heart was in psychology, helping people to be happier in their lives. That was the idea in my childhood, because of the result of the war that played a big role in our family.
And of course, your sister, because like you just said, you wanted to help people to be happy. And as a young child, you grew up hearing that your sister is not autistic or any other label, but unhappy. So I can clearly see the roots of what you wanted to do always. This is why I went so far into your childhood because it plays a role the way, our experiences as children, our life as children shapes who we are, who we become. And it's very powerful to see those connections many years later, right? To reflect back and see those connection points. It really fascinates me always.
That's so beautiful, Anna, how you phrase that, because if I say in one sentence, what are you doing like today? And of course, that's asked often. I have all these standard sentences that you have to prepare, for introducing yourself. But my sentence is really helping people to be more happy in their lives, really. And it's a vague sentence, but it contains the line with what I'm doing. It is the line through the work.
It's your entire life. Yes. I always find that the books we write, the things we teach, the careers we choose is always it's really very personal. Like, I decided to become a psychologist and to work with orphans. Well, at the time I was 13 when I decided that, and I lost my mother. I lost everything. And I never thought that I was trying to understand and help me or people like me. But now that I have this different view and different perspective as a mother myself, I can see that the seeds were planted then, and what I am, who I am, and what I do today is completely linked to those childhood experiences.
Yeah, and I read on your website a while ago that you have worked with all kinds of children and street children and so on. It's amazing. But you know what? This is so powerful what you say, because what you did is turning it around and make something positive from it. You understood where kids come from in that situation. And instead of like staying in the victim and in the loss feelings, you became powerful and helping others through it and with it and making it better. I think that is fantastic. That's so healing on itself. If you do that there is at least a positive aspect of losing your mother, that you became so powerful, helpful others.
Yes. First, we do things to heal ourselves and to understand ourselves better. And by doing so, we're helping others as well, I think. So why did you come to America? Why did you leave your family? Or is it even silly question to ask? Maybe you needed to leave everything behind and start a new life. I don't know.
Well, you open a big box there. I will do it as simple as I can, or answer that question as simple as I can. Yeah, to leave the family behind. I have only my parents, indeed, and my sister and my brothers and great, great friends. And I had a great life in Holland. But in the meantime, ex-husband wanted to come here. And there was another reason as well, is that I have 3 kids. My daughter, we lived in Rotterdam. My daughter was significantly afraid to share that she was Jewish. She was hiding that she was in fear. And so we were living in Rotterdam, and there were really some issues, and the safety was in a little way at stake. And I felt like I don't want my kids to be afraid to be Jewish. That's not a good thing, not again. And I thought, okay, let me go to Florida then. That was also the wish of my then husband. And to have here, and I had very mixed feelings, I have to tell you, for sure, because I'm not good in cutting relationships and all that, for sure not. But I had mixed feelings, and I thought, okay, we will go back every summer for 2 months. And we will stay in the homes of friends, and because everybody in Holland travels a lot, so all the friends we had always places to stay. So they can stay in touch with the family, answering your question. And then they can be here, and it's a nice experience too. And I had in the meantime also a son, my eldest son, who was pretty hyper, pretty ADHD. And for him to live in a country where you can be more in the water, outdoors. And it was just an idea that wasn't nice to do it for 3 years. I thought I'd do it for 3 years, and then I moved back. A great experience. Well, long story short, there was a year here. I went back to Holland the whole summer with the kids, and I came back and I got a sentence in my head and I said out loud, I belong here. And at that moment, I had peace with the situation. But one of my biggest obstacles to come here, I have to be honest really in this, I am very particular about school choices. And I'm the kind of mother that will put her kids in 3 different schools if that would be the best choice. And I want my kids to be in a nurturing, warm environment where they can be themselves with respect and care and love, and academics will follow. I believe that I didn't like what I saw here in the US so much in the school system, public as well as privately. And I had hesitation for that because I believe also your child, you can raise it only once, and I would rather do it good enough, as good as I can. So, and then Holland, the school, we're not perfect either. It's never perfect, but that element of care and love and non-competitive but cooperative and, the whole child, that was hard to find. That was one thing that I thought, I'm not sure. So maybe we had bad experiences here too. And we had in America bad experiences. I mean, privately, privately a little bit, publicly for sure. And you have great teachers everywhere. It's not about that. It's more the way of the teaching is done, how the school system functions with all the testing and the competition and candies in the classroom and the reward and punishment system, which I totally don't like. So I had a real confrontations there in myself. But my kids had issues with it for sure, but they never wanted to go back. And that's very interesting to me because it's not easy, but we have done it very well. We had a lot of goodbye parties in Holland, and because of Facebook, the connection stays. And actually, I'm surprised, and I would like to tell that a little bit. We came here, we were pretty well off. We had a very nice house. It was like, I found it like a challenge, like, wow, I'm 47, let me do this. And always loved to meet new people. And I totally went for it. And at a certain point, everything turned around in the wrong direction. We practically lost everything. We went through divorce. We had a lot of things that were very difficult. And that's not easy. I can tell you, I went through the biggest fears you can imagine, that I was joking, like, I don't know what to do. I am desperate. My kids didn't want to go back. And the beauty is I learned so much through that. I had to acknowledge myself again, more spirituality in my life. And I practiced the law of attraction day and night. And I got myself totally out of a very difficult situation. And the most beautiful thing is, and that's why I'm sharing it, is that my kids were in their teenage years, of course, when all this happened, they have no side effects. They are happy. They were never involved with drugs, not with crazy things. I don't want to say sex. We never know, of course, but they did not do any crazy things. They're happy, successful in schools. My boys are attending University of Southern California. My daughter just graduated, and they learned a lot from what we went through and how I dealt with it, and the Louise Hay tapes in the car, and Wayne Dyer, and all the stuff in the Kabbalah. And you know what? I think, that's what I say today out loud, I think I'm one of the very few single mothers or parents in the United States that says I was so happy with my teenagers. We had a great time. I love to be with teenagers because there's such a hype usually that, oh, teenagers, oh, they're 12. You know what's going to happen. I said, no, I don't know what's going to happen. So it is so much in your mind. And of course, the communication that I teach, that is very helpful too. And the basic attitude I have for children, which is respect. I have always treated them with respect, and that's what you get back.
So how often do you go back to the Netherlands?
I try once a year, but that's not always doable.
You said also earlier in this conversation, and I'm jumping here time-wise, I'm switching the chronology of events a little bit, but I want to ask you, you said when you were 20 years old, that was the time when your life took a turn and things were different, became different. What was that age for you?
Well, it's the age I left the parental home, and I was not any longer criticized every day. And, I that also opened my eyes so much for parenting, because my parents meant well, but they carried so much stuff that they didn't have so much access to a loving heart. And they parented in the way they were raised, probably. And they were really raised in the way like, we don't speak about what you do good. We only speak about what you don't do good. So that's a pretty negative approach, I would say. But many seem to have done that. So that was just a turning point. I left home and I could live by myself, and I had peace. I had peace of mind, and I could restore myself. I went right away in therapy too, because I wanted to know, am I crazy or not? Because that's what I learned to believe at a certain point. So luckily they told me I was not, so that was fine. But yeah, so from our wounds and from our difficulties, we learn. And I certainly had that. And yeah, and I would, like, now I became a classical flutist, and on the stage, you're very vulnerable. So if you have issues with self-esteem, or you do not really believe in yourself too well, it's very hard to perform. So I clashed in that area, of course, too. Got very, very, very nervous with a lot of performance anxiety, and I overcame all that with hypnosis. So I learned hypnosis when I was 22 or so. So, so that's, yeah.
Wow. How about your parents? Did you maintain a good, healthy relationship throughout? I don't know. Are they alive?
Yeah, my father passed a year ago, and my mother is still alive. And that is beautiful too. And because, as you know, I do the constellation work. Mm-hmm. It is, it is so much about becoming at peace with your parents. And I am that. It is like, yeah, if I look back at my childhood, it's a long time ago. I am totally beyond resentment or bitterness or anger or whatever. So I'm fine with it. It's not that we have a deep, warm bond. No, that's not. It's not like, but that's okay. It's fine. It's doable. It's, they won't criticize anymore. They don't get a chance. I will deal with it differently. I mean, it's different anyway. But it was also for me a lesson. I got my children by choice, and I wanted to give them the best possible childhood with love and care and fun, specifically too. And I want to have a good relationship. It's not that I want to be on their neck, but I really validate that most. And that's what I'm teaching parents, because if you mold and you take too much away, which happened to me in a way, I was very much molded, then you alienate your children, and most likely and often forever. And you don't get that bonding back. You need to really jump through many hoops to get a different relationship. So it's fine. It's good. It's okay. It's fine.
How about when your sister passed away? How do you think that impacted your mom specifically, or both your parents? I don't know. How do you think they dealt with that reality?
You have wonderful questions. Amazing. My parents have done the most touching job you can imagine. They had my sister come home when she was so sick for 6 months or so. And they took care of her like a baby. And they were very close and very warm. And my father has been tough with her when she was young. I wasn't thinking to talk about that, but she could be like a wild animal, and that she was treated not in the way that it was child-friendly, let me put it that way. Yes, you could say abusive, but that came from the despair, not knowing how to treat her. And that separated my parents in their relationship from each other, because my mother became resentful and angry, and so that's how it works often with a handicapped child as parents. So when she was so ill, they have cared for her like a baby. She was sleeping between them in the parental bed because she chose to do that. She started to go there, and before they would go to bed, that she had her place in the middle. So that has been a beautiful path of almost reconciliation. That's the word that pops up a little bit. So they have done the best you could do for a child that is going to die. Yeah. And it changed them, of course, because it was their life, it remained their life. And then the big sadness of losing a daughter, which was not for me so sad, because for me it was like feeling relief for her, because I knew she's now happier than she's ever have been all those years on the planet. But my parents focused more on the loss and the sadness. We haven't done it good enough in the past. The past, and that's of course a sentence that I say: raising your children, you can only do it once. If you live with the feeling, I wish I had that, and you're old, that's terrible. So that's why I'm so conscious and have been so conscious too.
So, what does it mean to live an authentic life? What does this term authenticity mean to you?
Oh, I love it. But a totally different question. To be fearless, being who you are, and expressing what you feel like you want to express without being in fear for the response, and really in connection to who you are. Yeah, not being as if, not pleasing, being kind to the world, but not pleasing in order to get something, to just be who you are and happy with that.
And what inspires you today, Carla?
People, the world. I was thinking in the morning, and maybe you feel like talking about that. I was thinking, shall I start a blog? The school our children really deserve, or should it be a podcast? The school our children really deserve to go through changes in the school system, that the testing will be much less and that kids will have a life as a kid and not with all that stress. So I have too many ideas and plans. So yeah, I wish I was much younger, that I have many more years, but I will do my work until the last breath for sure.
Wonderful. I want to thank you so much for being present, open, honest, sharing your story. Very touchy story. I was crying for the most part. It's yes. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. And believe me, I really enjoyed that I had the opportunity to share this. Of course, I hope that it will be helping some people that go through the same thing. But it's so nice actually to look at your own life in this way, because I usually don't think about it. And it's like you had some beautiful questions that made certain things for me clear too. Like, oh yeah. So that's amazing. And I'm very thankful and grateful that I have had this opportunity to be in your wonderful show.
Thank you. And that's it for this episode of Authentic Moments. Thank you so much for joining us today. Again, a reminder that I would like to get 100 reviews for the podcast on Apple Podcasts. If you have been listening for a while and you haven't rated or reviewed the podcast, do so. I will be choosing a lucky winner and you will get my beautiful mug and a handwritten note from me. I want to give a shout out to one of my awesome listeners who sent in a review, username Isuni, and it says, amazing work. It's been a couple of months that I have started listening to Anna's podcasts, and I can say she is really there to make a difference. I am expecting my first child, and since I know nothing about parenting, I decided to listen to some podcasts while commuting to work and found this awesome podcast by Anna. It's all theories to me so far, but I'm pretty sure all those good stuff that she talks about and hearing all those experiences by different people are opening my eyes to become an authentic parent one day. Thank you, Anna, for this amazing work. Your passion and love of what you do is greatly appreciated. God bless you. Thank you so much, Isuni. I know we're connected now on Instagram as well. And kudos to you for using this time and listening to podcasts. You don't even have a child yet. How amazing is that? Thanks again to all of you for choosing this podcast and spending time with me every week. I appreciate that. I don't take that lightly. And until next week, connect to the present moment, to yourself and your children. I am Anna Seewald. Thank you so much for listening.